All right, my intrepid A-push students, hope this finds you well. Um, a brief video here today, a little bit of a kind of funky transition going on. You're watching this either on Thursday, January 28th or Friday, January 29th, after we have officially concluded time period 4 and we're transitioning into time period 5. So an important video to make sure that we make this transition smoothly. We understand a little bit of new content, really kind of a review of some content that's going to transition us from 4 to 5, and that we understand some of the homework assignments I'm giving you. So you're watching this again after we have already completed the art gallery, as it were, for the mixtape project. I'm really hoping that went well and that you guys enjoyed that project. You are also watching this video after you have completed, I think, right, the time period for crowdsource quiz, as it were. No cheating, no Googling. You've got your notes, you've got your buddies, you got your buddies' notes. And you have found this on Google Classroom, and you have completed the work on the Google form. Okay, that's how I'm going to be looking for the assessments here. So make sure you complete that work on Google form. You should be done with that by now. And then you are done with time period 4. So we've got a new unit map here for time period 5, unit 5. We're going to tackle this one fairly quickly. As you see, it's about 6 class periods. And really kind of 5, the 6th class period is going to be the turning point, marking us that transition point from time period 5 into time period 6 with the compromise of 1877. So the focus of this unit, 1844 to 1877, is really nothing more than a focus on the Civil War itself. It's interrupted by our midwinter break. I'm going to give you probably some videos that I think are actually really good over midwinter break. I've got a project rolling around in my head for this unit, and I think we're going to work on an LEQ as a more kind of traditional formative uh, assessment for this unit as well. Paying attention, guys, to the bulletin for the day, okay? Because it's really important. Again, items 1 and 2 we've already addressed. This is, in essence, item number 3, our direct instruction video, introduction to causes and later, really, consequences of the Civil War. We have 3 pieces to our homework, okay? One is an actively learn assignment. In fact, it's a double assignment. There are 2 articles posted for you on actively learn. They are posted for you on Google Classroom. They are going to be due prior to the beginning of your next class period. I am giving you chapter number 13 from AMSCO. I'm asking you to read and annotate that chapter. I'm asking you to get that done no later than after the completion of your next class, which is when I am also asking you to complete the 3rd assignment, which is the causes of the Civil War, definitions, and chronology. Okay. That is also up on Google Classroom. And for that one, as I said, it's due after our next class. So you should get that work kind of underway. And then you'll have an opportunity to kind of complement your own work with our next period of class notes on the same topic. Okay. Again, video link to the presentation. We're getting into what I would largely constitute as some review and transition into the Civil War stuff. And then we're getting into our homework assignments and a good explanation of those on today's video. So again, the Industrial Revolution radically transforms America. It was a little bit slower to take hold in America because it was increasingly an expansive continent, and much to Thomas Jefferson's pleasure, it was largely kind of an agrarian society with cheap land and a lot of farms. Labor was fairly scarce. Loosely defined, until the rise in immigration that we witnessed at the end of time period four in the 1840s. Remember, that was kind of a new class of immigrants, a lot of Irish, a lot of Germans. And of course, they make up the bulk of this new labor force because of the Industrial Revolution's needs. The Industrial Revolution was assisted, if you will, by the embargo, Thomas Jefferson's embargo, where there was an early kind of manufactured dependence on American manufacturing. And by far and away, the most notable early uh, invention or change in technology was the cotton gin. Later, of course, we get to talking about the incredible rapid developments with respect to communication and transportation, the telegraph and canals, and of course the railroads. But the cotton gin early on makes the production of cotton cheap and widespread available, and it kind of, if you'll recall, in a little bit of kind of an ironic twist, increases Southern dependence upon slave labor. There had been some early movements towards, at least questioning whether or not abolition was the right path for the nation. But when cotton can become so rapidly produced because of the cotton gin, it doesn't require hands to clean it. Um, it's going to have a really important impact on the northern manufacturing textile economy. Um, so demand is going to go up, and with that demand, not necessarily for hands to clean it, but for hands to pick the cotton. So this concept of king cotton becomes predominant in the southern economy. Uh, in the South, it's no longer tobacco. It's no longer, rice or indigo. It is cotton is king. Um, and the production soars, and the demand for slave labor soars, and the system of slavery expands throughout the South. Um, and it creates this just the entire economic system is dependent upon cotton and the slave labor. Um, this is in large part what makes or at least assists, right, in America to become wealthy, because it feeds that textile industry in the North, and it becomes a huge raw product for the purposes of export as well. The production of cotton increases exponentially between 1840 and 1860. It accounts for more than half of exports from the United States. 75% of the cotton used in the British textile mills come from the U.S. South, and 100% of the cotton used in American northern textile mills, of course, comes from the American South. And that manufacturing economy uh, largely rests upon textiles. The factory system had spread to many industries, where, as we know, the economic systems in the North were already geared around, no pun intended there, geared around um, towns and the emerging cities that we talked about. There is an increasing diversity in manufacturing in the North, but there's no question about it that textiles are king up north. And the factory system, as a result of the advent of interchangeable parts, um, allows northern textile manufacturing to really take off. And so the nexus, the connection, right, between the economy in the north and the economy in the south is huge, and it's tied around textiles, which is tied around cotton, which is tied around slave labor. And that is going to bring up this notion of what is sometimes referred to as the peculiar institution, the dark chapter, the great moral question about slavery. There's absolutely no doubt that the slave system has a tremendous impact in increasing American wealth. And for that reason, we know that Southerners were in large part in favor of the system for its wealth production, and that Northerners, if not necessarily in favor of slavery, were at least turning a blind eye to it, again, because it played such a role in the production of wealth. Nevertheless, it's a sticky wicket and a thorny moral question. And when we talk about kind of the United States beginning to form this culture, abolitionism is among the most preeminent of the reform movements that begins to take root in the 1800s and into the mid and late 1800s. And ultimately, we know that that's going to win out. But that battle about abolitionism is really going to tell the story of the Civil War in the United States. That is the sole focus of time period 5, in my opinion. Okay. Understand that there are myriad opinions about abolitionism, okay, among the major and the minor political parties. Some of those minor political parties include the Liberty Party and the Free Soil Party. So the Liberty Party argues for eradication or the complete and total abolition of the slave system in America. The Free Soil Party, notably, opposes only the expansion of slavery. Okay, so again, if you are a free soiler, you might be morally uh, against the notion of slavery, but willing to accept it for its economic benefits, or willing to accept it in the South because you don't see any other way that the Southern economy can wean itself off slavery, but you certainly don't want it expanding. Okay. Meanwhile, the major political parties are, the Whigs, the Republicans, the Democrats, and the Whigs are very much split on the question of slavery, North and South. Northern Whigs tend to be very much against slavery. They could be abolitionists or they could be free soilers, but they're against slavery in one way or another. And Southern Whigs are pretty much in favor of slavery and likely in favor of its expansion into the Western territories as well. Republicans are typically aligned with free soil thought. Okay. Now, some Northern Republicans might, in fact, be abolitionist, but many of them are willing to turn that blind eye. They're willing to enjoy the economic benefits that come along with the slave system, but they don't want that moral failure expanding into the West. They don't want the United States kind of becoming a slave nation, as it were, as we manifest this destiny from sea to shining sea. And then we have our Democrats that claim that they are typically aligned with the common man. Okay. and therefore are pro-slavery. Uh, you could really make the argument, though, that they're really aligned with the oligarchy, right? Keeping in mind that um, those who actually owned slaves are fairly limited. It's really around like 25-30% of white Southerners are slave holders, and certainly less than that to any significant degree. The big time slave holders that, when we are conjuring up the image of these Southern plantations, make up a percentage in the single digits of those in the South, and certainly less than that when we consider all of the American population. Um, Again, though, the Democrats also are somewhat split. Some in the North are probably free soilers, maybe fewer than that abolitionist, but Democrats are typically kind of in one fashion or another a pro-slavery party at this point in American history. Abolitionism is beginning to take root among uh, the Free Soilers, among the Liberty Party, um, as these reform movements, including the Second Great Awakening, take hold. And Americans are beginning to understand that there is absolutely a notion of sin involved with slavery. We talk about Harriet Beecher Stowe, who writes Uncle Tom's Cabin in 1852. It is rumored, at least, that when Abraham Lincoln meets Harriet Beecher Stowe, he says to her, "So you're the little lady who started this whole war." So powerful was her abolitionist message in that work of fiction, and especially when it was carried overseas, that her book has a great impact in expanding and giving volume to the abolitionist movement. Then we have guys like William Lloyd Garrison, who is a straight up abolitionist. He's the publisher of The Liberator, an abolitionist newspaper that is circulated throughout the United States. And so this question of abolitionism is becoming more and more prominent in this emerging American culture. And then we have incidents like what we see with Nat Turner's rebellion, right? That may have had a different impact on white folks, as it were, right, up north than in the South. When we talk about kind of the result in the South being a tightening of control, but there in response is a witnessing from others that slavery and this chattel and racial based slavery is only becoming worse from a moral perspective. Uh, and we will see a lot more conflict as it relates to slave rebellions and runaways and all of that. And really notable, really interesting, as we're on that topic, of course, is the birth of slave patrols in the American South. And here I want to give you one assignment of really two articles. Um, and this topic may have popped up kind of on your screens, if you will, this past summer. Um, when we had gone through this, this summer of protests and Black Lives Matter in response to police brutality, um, and abuse of police powers, in particular regard against African American and African American men. Um, and what I mean is that there was a lot of literature and historical writing put out there that, hey, even the birth of American policing was really all about an extension of control over African Americans and slaves. That American policing in the South was born from slave patrols designed to track down runaway slaves and exert control over the slave population in favor of slaveholder and plantation policy. And so I've got two articles here that I think are pretty interesting side by side. One is clearly entitled The Racist Roots of American Policing from Slave Patrols to Traffic Stops. And the second one offers, perhaps, you tell me, a different viewpoint entitled The Problem with Claiming That Policing Evolved from Slave Patrols. So we've got two kind of different takes on this topic that were written each in this past year of 2020. And I have assigned both of these articles to you via Actively Learn. I've tried to link them through Google Classroom for you. If that doesn't work, you can find them in Actively Learn. But there are several questions associated with each of these two articles that I want you to get into. I think it's timely. I think it's interesting. I think it's fascinating, and I don't think we can talk about this chapter in history without examining this topic. The biggest debate over slavery during this time period, again, is on the question of expanding slavery as America moves west. Okay, how will the Western territories and the Western states deal with the issue of slavery? Keeping in mind that most northern states, okay, and you can see it on the map here, had outlawed slavery, or at least the slave trade, even prior to 1820. And southern states, that was typically, right, obviously here, not the case. Um, but as we manifest this destiny, what will the West become? Will it be slave territory? Will it be free territory? Well, America really kind of fails to address that problem adequately early on. And instead, what we're going to witness is a series of incidents where we just kind of kick the can down the road. And we start with the Missouri Compromise. And so, what we mean by that is that as Missouri is added to the Union in 1820 and 1821, they come in as a slave state, and that would upset the balance of power in Congress and Senate in favor of the slave-holding South. And so Maine is admitted, breaking off from Massachusetts. Maine is admitted at the same time as a free state. So there is a maintenance of this power balance. Okay, and the Compromise of 1820 allows for those states to come in under those conditions. Um, and requires a continued balance of power between slave and free states as new states are entering the Union. And it's decided famously that the 3630, that's the 36 degrees, 30-minute line of latitude, is going to become the Missouri Compromise line. That heretofore moving west beyond Missouri into this unorganized territory and later into the Spanish possessions and so on, that the law of the land will be, we'll see how well it holds up, that territories becoming states north of 3630 will be free. Territories coming into the United States as states south of the 3630 will be slave-holding states, or at least states where slavery is allowed. Henry Clay, the great negotiator, as it were, is instrumental in designing this Missouri Compromise. Again, in my opinion, this is just something that kicks the can down the road. In fact, The question is complicated again in 1850, as the United States has completed by now, right? The Mexican Cession, the Mexican American War has manifested her destiny all the way out to that shining sea of the Pacific Ocean. And again, American politicians are still trying to settle this question on expanding slavery out west. So the Compromise of 1850 is kind of a four-pronged compromise, where, as the slide says here, okay, there will be appeasing Southerners, a new and more strict fugitive slave law that would say would require northern states, when they come to know of a runaway slave that had escaped the South into the North, that they are required by federal law now to return that slave to the South. This is something that the Southerners really wanted, so that they can't just lose what they consider to be their property. Okay. Um, in a concession that would favor the North, California, all the way out west, is admitted as a free state. Okay. And so far, right, we've got kind of score one for the South, score one for the abolitionists, AKA, if you will, the North. Um, there is a bone thrown to the North a little bit on the banning of the slave trade in Washington, D.C. It doesn't outlaw slavery in the nation's capital, but it does outlaw the slave trade, okay, to actually buy and sell slaves in Washington, D.C. So it's kind of sort of a bone to the North, right? And kind of sort of allows slavery to exist for the South. And then there is the concept of popular sovereignty, which is a phrase we should know, right? That people are sovereign, people have the power. And here it's nothing more than absolutely the can being kicked down the road. Um, that says in the New Mexico territory and in the Utah territory, we are going to allow uh, the people living in those territories to vote whether or not they want to be slaveholding territories and eventually states, or free territories and eventually states. This concept of popular sovereignty, that comes about in the Compromise of 1850, will also play a massive role when other states are added in the other unorganized territories. Okay, so keep that in mind when we get to places like Kansas and Nebraska. The fact of the matter is that throughout this time, since the Louisiana Purchase, in essence, and up until the Civil War, there's nobody really kind of tackling the tough question that centers around who this nation is going to be. Is it going to be a free nation that lives up to the ideals on paper, or is it going to be a slave nation? And by kicking the can down the road, I mean that these series of compromises are woefully inadequate in actually addressing the root nature of the problem of slavery in America and expanding out west. Your reading assignment, to hammer home some of this point and to help you with your next assignment, is, I'm sure you'll be glad to know now, just one chapter from AMSCO, chapter number 13, The Union in Peril, 1848 to 1861. I've linked it twice on this slide here. It is in your Google Drive under readings, materials, assessments, etc., for Unit 5 readings. And so this is your text reading for this unit. Just the one chapter is what I'm asking you to get into here for time period 5. Okay. And this is also going to be instrumental for my lecture notes and your preparation for those notes with your next homework assignment, which is what I'm calling the list. Okay. And I've got a menu of events here. And this will become important when I get to the project that, as I said earlier, is rolling around in my head here a little bit. A menu of events or causes of the United States Civil War. I've got what here? About 15 or so, 16 or so um, events, happenings. You tell me what you want to give it a name. But all factors that you can make an argument are causes of the Civil War in the United States. Your job on Google Classroom is to provide a definition for each of these events. I'm thinking 2 to 3 sentences. You need to come up with an historical synopsis, an factual understanding of what each of these events are. And I want you to have them listed in alphabetical order. Okay. I will help us do this a little bit in class notes, but the AMSCO chapter will be instrumental in getting this done for you. And so this is a really important assignment towards understanding the causes and later on, really kind of as a result, the consequences of the Civil War. So again, you've got a couple assignments on Actively Learn. You have got your AMSCO chapter, and you've got the list. All right. So this one I want you to complete by the night that we complete our next class together. Okay. Same thing with your AMSCO reading. Your Actively Learn assignments, I want you to complete prior to our next class together. Ladies and gentlemen, that is all I got for you today. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks.